Okay, good morning, everyone. All people participating in this third webinar for the course, second webinar that is open to the public. I would like to, first of all, try to give you a brief context of why is it that we talk about students in this webinar and tell you where this is coming from. So this is a joint effort between the YAPA project that is called the Project for the Integration of Amazonian Protected Areas. This is a project managed by a consortium led by FAO, where we also have WWF, and we also have IUCN and United Nations, the Development Program of the United Nations, UNDP. They make up a consortium that has developed the YAPA project, which is financed by the European Union. Within the framework of this project and in partnership with Red Parties, which is an organization that groups or is a network that is made up by 22 systems for protected areas, 22 national systems for protected areas at the level of Latin America. That is the Red Parques. It's a park network. It's the network of protected area systems. This Red Parques, together with the FAO project, have moved forward a training capacity building that has been implemented by the Latin American School of Protected Areas of the University for International Cooperation. That is based in Costa Rica, where Cristina, Veronica, and myself work. The app, as we know it, the ELAP as we know it, has been implemented this training program. This is a program where several courses have been taught. One course on tourism, one course on financial sustainability, more specifically on environmental funds, and another course on adaptive management that are offered for the representative of Red Parques in the framework of this project or financed by this project. So this is the context where we have the cycle of webinars. These webinars are activities that are also part of the academic process. Particularly, these webinars are part of the course on governance of protected areas. Also a course where we have the representatives from the systems. There are 18 countries represented in the course with 25, 26 students in total that are working on governance. Within the framework of that course, we have organized a sequence of webinars which have been opened to the public, particularly. So all those people that you will see in the chat that say EST or student, they are precisely participants of the governance course within the framework of this program. So I would like to welcome all on behalf of the IAP project and the corresponding organizations that make up the partnership or the group of the project. Also on behalf of the Protected Areas Commission of Mexico that is currently in charge of the pro tempore coordination of the Red Parques. And on behalf of the Latin American Network of Protected Areas School, I want to cordially welcome all of you to this cycle of webinars and remind you that in total, or we still have five more webinars that we're going to be holding every week to talk and reflect on the topic of governance in protected areas and large landscapes. So on behalf of those organizations and particularly the Latin American School, I welcome you to this particular webinar, and I also want to thank you on behalf of the YAPA project, Red Parques and ELAB, to the speakers for their contributions to this process. and for the great effort of preparing the presentations and taking the day today to come here and make them. So thank you very much, and we hope this could be, as in the previous times, a very productive day. Chris? Thank you very much, Stanley. So we have a little bit of the context within the framework in which this cycle of webinars is developed. You can see my screen there. Yes. Okay, so within the framework of the cycle of webinars, the topic we have today is the integration of protected areas in the land organization or environmental land organization processes. I would like to share with you, let me see if I can do that. This is the agenda for today. So we are going to have the participation of three Latin American colleagues, three speakers available for the day. We're going to have the case of governance in the context of the reserve of and biosphere of the Definio Fertilidad with Angel. We really thank Angel for his time and his openness to join this webinar. The second presentation is going to be by Gisela Paredes from National Parks in Colombia. The title is Integration of Protected Areas to Organization and Land Governance in Multi-Scale and in the Borderlands, a contribution to good living. And to close the cycle of the three speakers, we are going to have Daniel Macias from Uruguay with a presentation on the trinational biological corridor of the Uruguay River, governance proposal border areas. We hope we can do it on the time. And at 9:20 Costa Rican time, we could open a Q&A session, and this is going to be through the chat. We ask you all to be attentive to the chat while the speakers make their presentations. You can start sending your questions in the chat, saying who the question is addressed to, or if it is open to the three speakers, you can also indicate that. And we hope we could be closing at 10 o'clock. So if you agree, we're going to get prepared to listen to Angel Prado from Honduras. Just a second. Angel, I don't know if you want to share your presentation, share your screen. Yes. I know we can see the screen. Just let me introduce Angel as first one. He is a forestry engineer from Honduras, currently working as the regional chief for the Occidental region in the National Institute for Conservation of Forest Development Protected Areas and Wildlife in Honduras. Is in charge of the implementation of the policy in the eastern region, western region, and he works with the regional planning, development projects with municipalities, regional organizations. He works on water basins, community forest development, protected areas, and climate change adaptation. He has experience in helping municipalities and doing adaptive work for human resource management and environmental management. And he works on the Trifinio Fraternidad Reserve. So once again, Angel, thank you very much for your time and your openness to be here with us. And well, floor is yours from now on for 20 minutes. And 5 minutes before, I'll let you know so that you can calculate your remaining time. Thank you very much. Please let me know if you can see my screen. Yes, I can hear you well too. Okay, thank you very much. First of all, I want to thank God for the opportunity He gives me of sharing with all of you. Also, thank you to the organizers for the invitation for their first through Engineer Regis, who is our national coordinator for protected areas. But I also want to communicate the greetings of our minister, Mario Martinez, for all of you that if he had the opportunity, he would also like to share with you sometime. Within the framework of this webinar, I'm going to start making, uh, giving you the national context in Honduras, and then I'm going to finish by talking specifically about the transporter protected areas, specifically about the National Biosphere Reserve, Trifinio Fraternidad. As a summary, the protected areas contribute to the preservation of biological diversity and the SDGs in Honduras. These, as all the countries that have signed these agreements, are objectives. And in our case, we have protected areas, we have sites for wildlife importance, we have private natural reserves, we have sub-basins and micro-basins under some management regime. We have areas under forest management with productive purposes. We have areas assigned for community forestry with two purposes, productive purposes and also conservation. We have forest vocation areas which are exclusive for protection, specifically in the areas of subbasins and microbasins, and we're also working in the biological corridors. We also have Ramsar sites. We have reserves, MENA biosphere, and we have very important world. So in that summary of the types of areas for special management we are within the framework of the MENA biosphere reserves. We are trying to accomplish the accomplishments of the program Men and Biosphere from UNESCO to be able to have territories that have been internationally recognized through the MAP program to be able to find the balance between the preservation of the biological diversity and the social, cultural, and economic development of the people through the objectives of conservation, development, and logistic support. In Honduras, we have the first reserve starting in 1980 with the recognition of the first Manabasfer reserve that is very active. This is the one from Rio Plátano, which is in the northern part of the country. In 2011, it was integrated to the World Network, this Trifinio Fraternidad. In 2015, we got Cacique Lempira, Señor de las Montañas, integrating these all reserves. Manambas for reserves have or share limits, share their borders. In 2016, there was an expansion of the Manambas for Reserve of Trifinio Fraternidad after a big analysis we made through the territory. And the last one was declared in 2017, which is the maybe San Marcos de Colon. This is in the south of Honduras. So in the context of these Mambis in Honduras, we have four. In that sense, we have 1 of the national territory. That is 11.8% of the national territory under these protected territories declared as MABs. In the case of the protected area, that's an archaeological and human for Honduran indigenous people. Also on the east, the west of Honduras, we have a MAB of the Trifinio Fraternidad that has 297,188 hectares. It is important talking about the protected areas that promote development. We have 5 protected areas within this reserve, and we also have a native town, which is the Torti. Also close to Trefinio Paternidad, we have the MAB Cacique Lempira, Señor de las Montañas, a little bit more towards the center. We have here also a native group, which is the Lenca. This one has 168,634 hectares declared, and it has 3 protected areas. And to finish giving you this context, the MAB San Marcos de Colon, it's towards the south of Honduras. It has 57,000 hectares and 1 protected area also. As you can see, a common thing is that they all have protected areas inside, but I'm going to focus specifically in Trifinio Fraternidad, the experience that we have decided to share. And there is a very important here because Trifinio Fraternidad is 3 countries. It's Honduras, Guatemala, and El Salvador. So in 1987, the 3 countries got to an agreement. They signed a trinational agreement and they created the Trinational Commission of the Trifinus Plan or Tripartite. The presidents, who are the maximum authorities here, started developing this trinational organizational structure. Later on, this commission reviewed when they could work in the territory, and the integrating element was for water. There are 3 big basins that get together in the territory. They start over there, and that is the binational water recharge area in the Motagua River, the Ulua River, which is exclusive for Honduras. But we also have the trinational basin of Rio Lempa, which is shared between Honduras, Guatemala, and also El Salvador. So that is the integrating element to be able to do the organization and also all development processes in this field. Trifinio Fraternidad was designated as a biosphere reserve, and it was recognized by the Man Biosphere from 2011, and then initially with 148,000 hectares, Honduras only had 18,425. So because of this, in 2015, Honduras proposed expansion, and the Trinational Commission agreed on this. So we went through the whole process for UNESCO to check the proposal. At the end, it was accepted and declared, and we have 19 municipalities of the Cotepeca municipality in Honduras and Copang for a total area in Honduras of 297,000 hectares. These pictures are pictures from the territory into the basins, Copan ruins. A bird that represents the territory, and also the churches that are representative of the culture and also of the religion. So we have the expansion process in 2015, and the MAB here a meeting of the Coordination Council for the program in March 2016, and in the 4th World Congress of the Biosphere Research developed in Lima, they proposal. I imagine that we have here nationals, students, or other people from Peru. So right now, currently, the maybe Trifino Fraternidad has 427,257 hectares in total, altogether, Honduras, Guatemala, and Salvador, 297,000 hectares in Honduras, corresponding to the political administrative limits of 21 municipalities. We have a political division of departments and municipalities, the department to municipalities, and these depend to, or these are municipalities from 2 departments. This includes a total of 5 protected areas, all of them members of the National System for Protected Areas in Honduras. I heard that Stanley talked about the National Park System. We have a National System for Protected Areas in Honduras where we integrate all conservation figures, national parks, biosphere reserves, sites of importance for wildlife, etc. So within that framework, the location you can see in this point, which is the Trifinio, the convergence of Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador. So this is like the starting point for all the actions of the management of this trinational territory. What is in the yellow is what used to be the Man and Biosphere Reserve. Trifinio Fraternidad, and what it's in the green is what we expanded for Honduras. So as you can see, the expanded territory in 2016 is a little bit greater than what we had in 2015. It's in the west of the country, considering Honduras and the departments of Copan and Coatepeque. It is zoned with a core zone of 28 hectares, specifically here for the sector of Honduras. And you can see in the green part that we have the protected areas. Those are the darker areas. They are considered as a core area. Then we have the buffer zone, which is the lighter green. And then the transition, which is the rest of the territory. Also considering here that in the yellow part, very this point here is called Monte de Cristo Trifinio Protected Area. It's a national park for us, also for Guatemala and for El Salvador. So it's very important because we use this territory as the basis, as the protected area. And then within the framework of this reserve, we enlarged it to be the Man and Biosphere Reserve. What are the functions we are working within the framework of this Man and Biosphere program? Number one, in terms of conservation, we have the World and Cultural place. It's called Copan Ruins. It's the only one we have in Honduras. We also have in Guatemala and Mexico, but in our case, in order to be able to expand the Man and Biosphere Reserve, this was very key. This was very important. There are 5 protected areas: the Monte Cristo Trifinio National Park, the Biological Reserve Hospital, the Biological Reserve Huizayotes, the Wildlife Protected Area Irapuca, and the National Park Cerro Azul. And then in the other figure of management or conservation, we have 25 microbasins that have been declared as water providing zones. This is very important because the integrating element that we worked in the territory was water. Everything revolves around water here. And then we also have experiences of doing volunteer private conservation through the management of private areas as conservation areas. Activities in function of conservation. Well, we have creating plans for protected areas, also some action plans, consolidation of initiatives for volunteer private conservation, as I was telling you, that we call them private natural reserves, consolidation of community management initiatives of microbasins and payment for environmental services. This is specifically in that area, that is an area that was considered as a protected area. The strengthening of landscape management schemes, also including here the management or the work with agriculture as some sustainable mechanisms. There is a diversity of institutions, and for this, we got together with the state institutions and also programs and projects with private initiatives, institutional strengthening with regards to wildlife management. There are initiatives for rescue centers. We also have a bird park, which is a private initiative, but is doing the reproduction and management of Borarroja, which is the national bird for Honduras. In terms of development, the Trifinio Fraternidad Reserve presents great opportunities for development in the region because it is in the borderline and we have an exchange between the 3 countries, Honduras, Guatemala, and El Salvador. We also have 3 borders, 1 towards El Salvador and 2 towards Honduras and Guatemala. In that sense, we are trying to improve the conditions for the commercialization of coffee because it's one of the most important products in the region. Improve in agricultural production towards sustainable agriculture. Tourism and ecotourism is very important because of this exchange we have, specifically because of the protected areas at Copan, develop capacity or build capacity in arts crafts in order to provide some value added to the products that the population acquires, encourage forest management, especially in plantations. We have a national restoration plan in the forest region. So every year we have the purpose of restoring between 250 and 400 hectares through conservation, through natural reforestation, but also forest plantations with commercial purposes. In terms of logistical support, yes. I just want to tell you that it's just 5 minutes. Okay, so getting into strengthening territorial governance in the territory and the protected areas, we made the confirmation of the local managing committee for each country with the participation of different programs and projects. We also have an the integration of the trinational managing committee for the biosphere. This is a very important, it's unique because the trinational reserve is unique. And in the area of conservation and development, we have the management of protected areas and basins and the compensation mechanisms or offset mechanisms for water services. We also have the integration of the youth network in the because we're incorporating the youth for them to do conservation and to have different lifestyles. It is also important to see here the land acquisition in the conservation areas. This is the integration. We have the General Assembly plus all the members of the Biosphere Managing Committee. As you can see, you have the state, we have the cooperation, we have the civil society and the private enterprise, the private companies. Recently, on December the 10th, we made the integration of the National Managing Committee, and also we integrated the Tri-National Managing Committee that the mayor from La Palma is the coordinator of the Tri-National Committee. What do we have as a progress? The representation of the country as the maximum entity for the biosphere reserve. And access to the funds of UNESCO. We have developed projects with these funds, a strengthening of national and local governance committees, local committees, and so on. And then also the positioning in the region of Central America and the World Network. It's important that 3 years ago we made a very important development. We integrate representatives from all the biosphere reserves and the strengthening or capacity building of the stakeholders. How do we integrate ourselves to do this management in 3 levels, a strategic level and an operational level? These images you see here are from the 4 communities of Biosphere Research. This is the Trifinio Fraternidad. This is Rio Plátano. This is the Fraternidad No Lempira. Basically, and San Marcos de Cardona, the National MAB Committee was also integrated and is chaired by the Secretary of Natural Resources and Environment, together with that has a secretariat by Alejandra Reyes. We also have the representative of UNESCO for Central America. What are the challenges we still have? Well, I am going to put myself here to start closing. The technical institutional capacity building, also at the local level, to improve interinstitutional and intersectorial coordination. This is key, but it is not so easy in practice. To promote and encouraging the adoption and harmonization of the objectives and functions with the public policies, the plans, and the strategies promoted by the local government. Sometimes there is a divorce between the local governments and the central governments, national government, and also with the institutions. The strengthening of the National MAB Committee and the local MAB committees to contribute to the implementation of these strategies and plans of action at the world level and also at the regional level. Financial management, financial resource management, management of tools or partnerships also with for the reserves at the national level or the VeroMap network. We're also doing these lessons to youth networks in the biosphere reserves. We already have these networks in a couple of the places. Trifino Fraternidad and Cacique Limpina. We're missing two to create guidelines for the follow-up and compliance of the commitments. So this is a very quick presentation. There is still a lot that I can tell you, but time here is a must. So this is what I wanted to share with you. Thank you very much. Perfect, Angel. Thank you very much for the presentation. Thank you also for respecting the time and for always being attentive to all the work and Q&A session. Maybe we can elaborate on some questions while the second speaker gets ready, Gisela. I want to tell all speakers and participants that you can remember to ask the questions in the chat and you have to indicate who it is addressed to. And in the case of Angel, that already made his presentation, maybe Angel, you can also collaborate by answering some questions through the chat. It would be very useful because then there's a lot of interest, there's a lot of questions, and sometimes it is difficult to be able to answer them all. So if you can speed up some of the answers to the chat, that would be very positive. And this is for the three speakers. So thank you very much. Thank you, Angel. And now, Gisela, you can start sharing the screen while I introduce you. She's going to present her case. Gisela Paredes, she's from Colombia. She has a master's in rural development, a master's in sciences of professional sustainability and global change. She's an environmental auditor with the International Program in Territorial Organization. She is a member of the World Commission for Protected Areas and the Group of Transborder Conservation of IUCN and member of the research group of the Global Center for Methods for Sustainable Development in the University. She works in national parks in Colombia and she works in the Development and Territorial Organization. She was part also of the group of protected areas of IUCN South between 2010 2011 and coordinated the technical secretariat for territorial organization in Colombia between 2019. Giselle is also an educator. She's a researcher in that organization. And I get the license of saying this is perhaps one of the persons with more experience and knowledge in terms of land organization, protected areas, and the region. So thank you very much, Stella, for being here, for sharing with us. And well, the floor is yours. 5 minutes before, I will let you know so that you can get organized.
Thank you. Can you please let me know if you can hear me fine and see my presentation? Yes, everything's perfect. So thank you. First of all, good morning. I'm really happy to be with you here today. It's an honor. So I would like to greet all the park rangers in Latin America, communities, territories, the academia. What I'm going to talk about today is part of a process that we have been working on for quite some time now. All pictures. Excuse me because there will be a lot of pictures, but there are so many people that I would like to thank. First, I'm going to talk about 4 topics because we're going to be talking about protected areas, land management, and governance. What are the technical formation and operating strategies? Some of the achievements that we have had for these 9 years, and some of the lessons learned and recommendations. I would like to mention to start that Colombia is a country, a unitary republic with 1,103 municipalities, 32 departments, and the protected areas of the country are into 730 municipalities. And when I say protected areas, I mean the national, regional, and civil society areas. When we talk about the land management, I will refer all types of governance, public, national, regional, and also that pertaining to civil society. These are some images of a protected area, and then you start looking at a series of elements. So you have tourism, occupation, mining, and roads. So if you think about any of these topics, you need to work in land management. And I would like to mention why we are going to talk in land management. And we have different elements. First, we have the urban topic and how we have these protected areas that we have inside these urban areas, or are they rich in these protected areas? Of course, we have poverty, and that is something that we have in the territorial context. There's been an increase of natural disasters and risks that are no longer natural and that are the result of global change. But there's also a response to this new institutionality. What can we do in order to plan, and how can we work along with others? Because in here it's no longer about the academia or managers or people in communities, because we need to respect each other, and how can we work together? And it is also important to mention that there is a social conflict, not only in Colombia, but throughout Latin America and also worldwide. And this is why we talk about these explosions, social explosions. But there's also a key element, which is the change in the use of land, that is reducing the production in land that had an opportunity for agrarian processes, but they are also invading protected areas and strategic ecosystems. We also have climate change, globalization, and changes in the focus of planning, and also a need for governance so that we can all, as citizens, officers, and members of the academia, participate in decision-making processes. But also we have conflicts in the territories that are the result of different things. But also, and for the Latin American concept, I would like to highlight that countries in Latin America signed an agreement with the ILO, and that they recognize some of the communities, indigenous communities, but they're also making advances in the recognition of other types of communities. And we also have commitments when it comes to the goals of sustainable development. And the World Health Organization has been working since 2010 by saying, well, biodiversity is indeed related to public health. And these are some of the elements that we've seen. For example, traditional medicine, but also humanism, nutrition, and the Paris Agreement, but also a platform for risk management, in which we have to talk about the different commitments regarding risk management, because they say, okay, let's not cross the planet borders. So it's important for us to be able to handle biodiversity in order to be able to handle risk. And also for a country, particularly Colombia, is it has multiple ethnicities and cultures. We have 115 indigenous communities, 64 languages. We have different types of communities. And we also have 6 natural regions that are quite different, like the Caribbean, Amazonia, Orinoquia. And in here, we need to think, what can we do in order to work with these multiple ethnicities and cultures? And we know that this is a different era in which we have been able to alter the different systems, in which we've gone across the planet borders. And maybe you have heard about climate change, how we have altered all the processes, and how we have been invading things, and how climate change, and I have to go back to this, how changes in the land of soil, and then water pollution, and many other things. So the conflict that we are seeing now, some people might say that it's just a social and environmental conflict, but I would like to mention how in Latin America, one of the strategic topics in order to work with conservation is the concentration of land, and how we have been covering all of this, and this will transcend into protected areas. And this is where we need to start working with the agrarian systems to see what we are going to do about this. And in here, this is from the University of Barcelona, and you can see here all types of conflicts that we come across in a region. But what can we do about it? Well, this is overwhelming, and we have been working in conservation, but what is the difference in what we do today? Well, in here, it's important to mention how we have been working in a political, technical, and formation and operational strategy in order to integrate protected areas. And I would like to say that this has not been something that happened overnight. It's been a process including action, research, and many other things. And we needed to answer the questions that we needed. On one hand, we have productive systems of peasants, which is a process in itself. And we also have projects. We have different projects that have supported us, and some others are still there, like, well, almost ready. But we have conducted research on the Sierra Macarena. We have the conservation of biodiversity, which we analyzed since 1998. And then 1986 to 2005, I worked on the Amazonia, Oriconia, and also on the Caribbean. And back in the Caribbean, along with my partners, we designed a regional system for protected areas of the Colombian Caribbean, also with the different regional authorities, which is something that is still going on today. And then we also work out environmental evaluation and assessment and risk management from 2005 to 2009, and we coordinated a national system of protected areas. And why do I mention all of this? Because this has been a progressive, accumulative process of knowledge, comprehension. And then I had the possibility to go to the south, where we worked in a project on governance, life conditions, and climate change on the Chaco Sudamericano, between Paraguay and Bolivia, and we went all the way to Argentina, because there are some ecosystems that go beyond the boundaries. And I would like to say that we conducted research of all these lands, and we covered protected areas that we found there. And also we had a thesis on land management, on how protected areas were being integrated to the development and land management plan carried out by the municipalities, departments, and the whole nation. So since 2000, we started getting all of this, and then we started to see in other areas that are not included, and who's going to make decisions, the other authorities. And then we started to analyze how this buffer function could be seen in the light of land management. And then, along with ECLAC, we have been working about land management. And now we can say that for 2021, the protected areas in Colombia are part of the general policy of land management of the whole country. And all of this has been a process that included research and action. We start, and then we start working on it, and then we keep on asking questions. And what did we find during this research? Well, first, there is a disintegrated vision of the territory, because we talk about environmental planning as if it were something separate than management. And this is how some people might look at it, because they might say, you interested in environment, keep doing that, and then we'll keep on working on land management. But who will make the decisions on the territory? The mining sector, transportation sector, and then we're talking about the agrarian sector, the tourism, and they should all share these ecosystems. But there is also great confusion and proliferation of instruments that are now into the same territory. Of course, our conservation has been working on for 60 years, and then we work with UNESCO, CBD ecosystems, and we have a whole variety of instruments for planning that are going to reach these territories. But how can we talk about these instruments, and how do we understand each other? It is also important to say that we have a low positioning of environmental topics, and not only for protected areas, but also biodiversity when it comes to development and land management. And sometimes they say, well, it is blocking development, or you might think that these areas are there, but nothing happens, but we need to plan about this development. In order to work with these three topics, we could not do it by ourselves. So we started looking about our possible partners and whom we should work with. And so we have this political, technician, operational, and formation strategy. And then we started taking a look at the stakeholders that would have a competence in this topic. In the case of Colombia, we have the National Planning Department, the Ministry of the Environment, which is the governing body for anything that's environmental, the Ministry of Housing, the Geographical Institute Agustin Codazzi that works on geographical information, official information, and also risk management, environmental, regional authorities, and also the planning unit when it comes to rural areas. And then we saw something that was quite important. because it turns out the community councils and some indigenous reserves and peasant communities, just like protected areas, were not being part of these land management instruments. So we started working on this. And I need to tell you what we have achieved so far. And then we need to recognize that the focus, in order to work on land management, we must combine these four focuses. It's not only about the ecosystem that we have since the CBD, which is important, of course, but we also have a focus on rights, three types of rights: the collective rights of environment for any citizen, and also the ethnic rights for all the communities. And I am also talking about the right to the city, and this is something new, which are the rights of nature. And this started since all the way from Bolivia and Ecuador, but now we have made advances in Colombia. But we need to take a look at the focus of these protected areas that are not alone. They are in a rural or urban context, or they are in the midst of a transition. So we need to see how we can plan. And then we also have risk management and climate change. And in here, of course, we are one of the solutions based on ecosystems. But how can we articulate all the instruments? Well, that is the focus that we need to consider in order to work on land management and governance. And also, back then, we came up with a design of pilot cases in order to integrate these protected areas to land management. And as part of these pilot cases, what we were looking for were not only parks, but also other types of institutions to take a look at concrete cases, because biodiversity is also territorial, cultural, and also when it comes to ecosystems. And this is the reason why we started saying either we work together to the territory with all those that are part of it and have competence, and then we need to start discussing what we're going to do at national level and then at local level. And in here, we also have a rupture of this new paradigm, because planning from down up or the other way around is something that we need to coordinate when it comes to planning. Because when it comes to pilot cases, why did we come up with them? In order to think about the different policies, but not only on the environmental sector, but also when it comes to Colombian land management and these pilot cases that we have. As you can see, they are all part of land management, but they also work on critical aspects. For example, how can we have land management near the border? Or what about land management when the park is within the expansion area of a municipality? Or what when we do when a municipality has 6 protected areas on the inside? And what does the municipality think about this? But there is also a regional scale, which are the modules of occupation, and then I am mentioned different categories of parks and also land management related to the municipality. But also, excuse me, because I lost something here. We also have the wetlands when it comes to land management, because these wetlands are the ones that we tend to forget about. And this is the reason why they dry up and we need to do something. And also risk and climate change when it comes to land management. And also rural soils, like protected areas that are also part of all these rural area. But I also like to mention how can we prevent conflicts between mining and the different planning or development plans for protected areas as part of a municipality. And this after 5 years, they started saying, well, this is the neighborhood, and now it's called the planning of a common territory. But who have participated on these pilot cases? Well, we have the different regions in the country, and all these institutions have participated. And these have competence in different topics. And in here, I refer mining, housing, in maritime areas, but I'm also talking about regional institutions, communities, municipalities. And I would like to thank all of them and also the academia and others that have joined our process. And we are still here, like you, IUCN, and what can we articulate to this plan? Well, when it comes to the management of parks, but how can we articulate these plans to the territorial land management when it comes to a department or municipality? And this is something that we had to establish along the way, but we could not do it by ourselves. But when we position all of these, if we overlap an indigenous community, we need to think about the life plans as part of this municipality and as part of the land management plans, or how are we going to develop these Black communities as part of this land management for the territory or the biosphere? Or even though if I'm not managing that, we need to think about strategic ecosystems or other sites. And in here, I need to talk about they were thinking about an integrated look at all of this. And in here, we see what we have done. We have generated technical guidance. It's not just about how it bothers us, but how common this is. And then we started preparing documents since 2012. And we started working on parks, and then we decided what could be used for the different departments. And then based on that, we started working on the national instruments for land management. You only have 5 minutes left. And in here, we have other technical guidance that we have prepared. And it's also important to mention the incidents that we have had in public policies, because it's not just for the park system. We're talking about national public policies where we can include protected areas and how these parks are going to participate in all the committees for the different commissions of land management in Colombia. But parks were also called to coordinate the technical secretariat for this commission on land management. We have been working in the strengthening of capacities at municipality level, department level, at regional level, national level, but also at the border. And I have not discussed the borders, and this is something that we are working on currently. We have also worked on networks, on leadership, like we have worked with the ethical topics, and also we have exchanged experiences with Argentina, for example, and in here with Tanzania. And they came to take a look at what we were doing. And it's also interesting to know that during the Latin American Congress of Protected Areas, there was an space for land management. 200 presentations were received. And why do I mention all of this? Because all of this was necessary in order to work on a borderland management. And this is the reason why Colombia had a tri-national program that became a part of the Ministry of the Environment of Colombia, Ecuador, and Peru. This is a tri-national program for protected areas. And we have tried to empower all of this scheme between the borders, and then we came to an agreement with the different governments at Puerto del Carmen and the municipality of Leguiza Putumayo, and this is what we achieved internally. On one hand, we had an impact on that municipality that was forgotten, and we also started working on public policies at national level. And so this is something that might seem crazy back then, but currently it's becoming a law when it comes to borders in Colombia, and this is all the training that we have provided, and we have also worked on climate change. And Chris, I'd like to mention briefly how we can articulate these protected areas when it comes to land management. These are the scales with the municipalities, departments, regions, and borders, depending on the context, but it is going to articulate instruments for land management and also development plans and ethnicities. And this is why it's important to have a land management for parks and protected areas to see how we can articulate all these plans. And this is something that we have been working on along with the different life plans or development plans, and also at different scales when it comes to the departments, regions, and also at national level that we're doing when it comes to the policies for the land management or development plans, or what we're working on the association of these borderland management plans. And it's also important to mention that we must recognize that all contexts are different. And this is why this land management plan for each municipality is going to be different. But also when it comes to protected areas that are also different, because we have different ways of occupation, types of properties, and there are elements that are going to transcend the boundaries of the municipalities or departments, and we have diverse realities as part of the territory. And of course, what are the lessons learned? That when it comes to territorial governance, it's not just about the governance of protected areas, because this is just one, but we're also talking about natural resources, marine, forest, food, and land. So we are in the context of this territory, and then we need to work on territorial governance. We have multiple territories, and the social ecosystems are going to be a part of these territories, but it's not the same. And it is necessary to transcend the political and administrative boundaries, and we need to change this fragmented vision of protected areas, because they will tend to disappear between the ecosystems, borders, and cultures. And Cristina, I would like to talk about the language, and I would like to call the attention to this, because in some areas we have some paper, some things that are just in paper. So when you take a look at the maps of different protected areas in Latin America, you need to have this evidence. And it's important here to mention that we cannot keep on having this liquid communication where we say, well, by just a 10-word message, it's going to be enough for training purposes. We need to rescue the role of the government, and that's super important because we have been told that common goods are the responsibility of the government, like health and education, but there's also ecosystems, and we need to cooperate and strengthen all these existing processes, and we need to support them. But we must remember that we should all defend the environment, and we need to work from the same values, from territorial ethics, cooperative work, solidarity, recognition, respect, trust, and nature. People and the territory must come first. And I would like to invite you to take a look at the contents of the guide that we prepared, which can be useful for you, a guide for protected areas that will be added to the land management. And I would like to say that some of my colleagues, like park rangers and in the communities, have also written some testimonies that are wonderful. And I would like to thank all of you that I do respect, admire, and thank all of you, park rangers, communities, environmental institutions, and those of you that have cooperated, and the civil society, and all my people. So thank you, everyone, and I think that together we can do it. Thank you. It's been really, really important, very interesting. So now we have many things in the back of our heads to reflect upon, but it's a positive message. And something that I would like to emphasize is that this is a challenge, but we have demonstrated on the Colombian parks that they are strong, that we need articulation. And this is a process that sometimes need a lot of energy, patience, capacity to establish a dialogue, but it's not impossible, and this is a proof. It would be great to have more time for you to keep on discussing many of these cases. I'm familiar with just a few of them, and each one of them would allow to have, I don't know, a half-hour talk, and maybe we can spend the whole day talking about this. So this is pending for another space if we have the opportunity to invite you again to talk about the different cases and methodologies, because this is a very interesting thing when it comes to the different territories and protected areas, and the good governance is going to lead to these spaces for dialogue. So this is a positive message that together we can do it. So thank you again. And now we are seeing more and more questions on the chat. So to the extent possible, if you can start answering, please do so, and then we'll open at the end the Q&A session. So thank you, Gisela. Thank you, Chris. I'd just like to say that whenever you would like to invite us again, maybe we can come along with the park rangers and representatives of the communities that we have been working on, because the idea is to work together and for you to get to know this process along with the institutions that we have been working with. Perfect. So we have that possibility open for all the members of this process. And I think it is really important. Well, I read on the chat some concerns about these guides that you were mentioning. So maybe you can share the links if you can. And then if you could share that link again, I would really appreciate it, because it's available for free now. Thank you. Yes, Stanley? Well, before moving on, we are sharing, upon request of the people, the different links of the past webinar in 3 languages so that you can look at it. We have the 3 links for the 3 different videos in Spanish, English, and Portuguese of the previous webinar. Now we are going to move on to our last presentation of today's webinar. We have Daniel Macias. Maybe you can start sharing your presentation, Daniel, while I'll introduce you formally. So that you can start uploading it. Perfect. Well, we have now Daniel Macias from Uruguay, an agronomist, a master in planning and management of the environment and natural resources. Since 2018 up to today, he is a part of the technical secretariat of the Committee for the Development of the Uruguay River Basin. And he is also a founding member of the group for the active environmental protection of Bella Unión. And this group is co-managing the natural protected area of Rincón de Franquilla on Bella Unión, which became a part of the National System of Protected Areas back in 2013. And since 2007, he has been a representative of Grupama in the transborder movement of NGOs of the triple border, and is currently the president. This movement is promoting the trinational biological corridor that he'll present, and he's also representative of Grupama on the board of directors of the Uruguayan network of environmental NGOs. And he has also worked as consultant for the General Direction of Rural Development, the Ministry of Livestock, Agriculture, and Fishing. So thank you for being here once again. Thank you for your time and for being here with us. We have 20 minutes for the presentation, and I'll interrupt you to let you know that you are running out of time.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Cristina. Thank you very much for the invitation, and good morning to everyone. It is a pleasure and an honor to participate here with our Latin American friends, and it's been a pleasure to hear the 2 previous speakers, Angela and Gisela, that we have heard before, also in the forum, with an excellent presentation about the organization and organization. We've come here to share with you, to tell you about an initiative that is promoted by the civil society. It is a processing construction, as it says over there, in the area of the triple border between Argentina, Uruguay, and Brazil. The trinational area. We're not going to talk about borders, because borders is something that divides us a little bit. So that's why we call it the trinational area. As you've said, the technical secretary of the Committee for the Development of the Uruguay River. This committee is an organization of a strategic partnership between the local authorities that is doing the coordination and permanent contact with subnational governments, national governments, and the organizations that have some responsibility in the basin. But it acts in interaction with organized civil society, and that's why I'm participating in the committee. This committee from the basin is made up by the 13 municipal intendancies in Argentina, 4 municipalities in Brazil, and other 3 that are in the process of uh, session the 6 permanent tendencies that we have in the Uruguay River and the 3 municipalities from Uruguay. There's also a very particular organization because it has been created from the bottom up. We started first with the president of some tendencies, departmental and municipal from the countries, and then from 2019 we also got local governments from Brazil joining us. We have here, this is the basin of the Uruguay River. It's 350,000 square kilometers. It's 1,670 kilometers from the river. And more than talking about the committee, I'm going to tell you about the civil society and tell you a little bit about the experience we have been doing with these organizations. This initiative is located in the triple border, the oldest one of the world. Once the intendant of Montecasero told us that this was the more austral triple border of the world, and we really went to the world map, and we saw that, yeah, that it was the most austral border. We have here a closest view, a closest satellite image, Montecaseros in Argentina, in Corrientes, the largest city. Then Bella Unión in Uruguay, and Barra do Quaraí, which is the smallest one in Rio Grande do Sul. There is an international bridge here that brings together Uruguay and Brazil. We don't have anything with Argentina, and the river is crossed just by boat. Okay, and here we see that the environment, we put flags, we make lines in the map, but the environment is really a borderless, continuous. This is a very important phrase we always use here. This is the union of the two rivers, and we don't see anything to divide. So to defend this borderless environment, we created in about 2005 the Transborder Movement of NGOs for the Triple Border that brings together NGOs from Argentina, Brazil, and Uruguay in this area. We are a small organizations. I mean, we get together often. We change places for meetings. Even the transfer to Argentina is always by boat. And we're all devoted not just to protect the environment, but also to promote educational and cultural exchanges. Also at the recreational level, as you can see this that we had between Uruguay and Brazil with these bicycles. We work with the native groups and so on. I mean, everything that makes up the integration, and it's not just the environment. Okay, so from this transporter movement, we got this idea of making a trinational biological corridor. Even at the beginning, we called it Trinational Park, but then we were convinced that it was a title that was generating kind of noise with the authorities because this implied like something supranational and with, like, because of an issue we had with an area that was in the middle that we're going to talk about later on. So this transporter protected area brings together the state park of Espinillo in Brazil, which is a conservation unit of the state of Rio Grande do Sul. Rincón de Franquia, which is a protected natural area in the national system in Uruguay, and an area in the field, General Avalos in Argentina, and also the islands that are close to the Uruguay and the Paraná rivers that have sovereignty in the three countries. We can see this here again in the satellite image. This is the Parque dos Peniló in this area, like surrounding the Cuarán Chico. Rincón de Franquia is the natural protected area. Sorry, there was some interference. The natural protected area goes around the Cuarema River from the International Bridge. It goes all around. This is the Uruguay River, and it goes to the Uruguay River to this area here of Bella Unión, and right here We have this river with a lot of wetlands, the Mirinay River, which is the natural parent of the uh, streams of Libera in Argentina. In May 2007, the movement in the city of Chajari is one of the organizations that make up the movement, approves unanimously the promotion of this trinational biological corridor. So, what is the idea with this biological corridor? We want to optimize the environmental protection of the ecosystems in the riverbank forest, the park forest, and the wetlands to promote the cooperation and understanding between the three countries. That's called the regional integration. We should not forget that at that moment in 2007, that was also a moment of tension because of the cellulose factor between Uruguay and Argentina, and a little bit more towards the north. Also, what we tried was to maintain our brotherhood and the understanding between the countries and contribute to the social and economic development, local and national, through the growth of sustainable tourist activity. So, what are the components or the ecological resources of this corridor? In Rincon de Franquia, and I'm sorry that I start with Uruguay, but this is an area for the management of habitats and species. This was also a construction that started from the bottom. Rincon de Franquia is the first protected natural area that was born from the community. The rest of the protected areas from the national system of Uruguay had been created by the official entity, by the National System for Protected Areas. But Rincon de Franquia was promoted by Grupama, an NGO that was founded precisely for that. And it was a whole long process going from 2004 to 2013. It was decreed by the presidency that they enter into the national system of protected areas. Also, the local governments participated or supported, which is the municipality, the local government, and the department government. So this is a little bit closer image of what I just showed you. The protected area is practically linear, a linear park that also comprises the protected areas going from the international bridge on the Conem River all the way to the Bella Union City in front of Monte Caseros. So it's 1,229 hectares. When I was looking at the figures that Angel was shown, we got like an inferiority complex here because we're a very small experience. If we compare it to that, we have here the Brasilera Island that we're going to talk about this later. They made studies when the process was started. When Grupama was starting, there were some doubts. There were some doubts if there was really enough ecological bridge. We made a partnership with the University of the Republic and with Aves Uruguay. And we saw that really there were more than enough merits to develop this. So there was part of the fauna, the flora that was subtropical, that was moving through the corridor of the Uruguay River. They had some influence from the Pastizal, from the Chaco, and there were some amphibians. There were some species that were endangered. And well, especially birds, the ornithological wealth of the area was really big. The Aves Uruguayan bird life that was declared as important for the conservation of birds, more than 220 species were recorded. And well, we showed that, but obviously the same thing happened in the side of the park of Spinillo, Brazil, or the mouth of the river Ominina in Argentina. So we have the different ecosystems here. Basically, it's like some shore forest, the rivers, some wetlands, neighboring wetlands. This is the picture here showing also some people visiting the area, the triple border. We can see the three countries from up there. And then the other thing that we consider important in Rincon de Franquia is that since it was the first protected area that was promoted by the community, we also had the privilege of being the first protected area that is co-managed by an NGO. And this model for the promotion, the creation from the community, and this co-management, this participatory management. That is a little bit what we have been promoting with some little changes for this transnational biological corridor. We have the national authority, the National System of Protected Areas, which is the competent environmental authorities for protected areas, the intendants of Artigas and the Department of Artigas, which is the regional government, and the municipality of Villanueva, which is the local government, and then Grupama, which is a local NGO. We have the state park of Espinillo, very close to the mouth of the Crime River. It is also a park that is in an excellent state of conservation. We have iguanas, we have spinillos, which is the kind of trees. We also have a species that is endangered, which is the yellow cardinal that is over there in this environment. This is another picture. It is a conservation unit. It's not open to the public yet. And precisely through all this movement, we're trying to do all the synergy and all the different management for this to be open to the public. This was created by an environmental compensation or offset law from a Brazilian thermal power company. And in Argentina, we find Campo General Avalos, which is a field in the mouth of the Mirinay River, which is a river that has lots of wetlands and very interesting ecosystems. That is a little bit like the continuation of the Libra water beds. And then this General Avalos field is property of the Ministry of Defense of Argentina. It's a military field. And we are doing some processes that fortunately this year, they have also been well directed with the effort of the Argentinian people, but also with the support of the Uruguayans and the Brazilians to create a natural reserve area, as they call it, in that place, and take advantage of the framework agreement that they have between the Ministry of Defense of Argentina and the National Park Administration in Argentina too. So we have progressed a lot and we're very close to accomplishing that. We also have the islands on the Uruguay and the Crane rivers. The ones on the Uruguay River, they have some very interesting flora elements like this cane, Tacuarzo, which is the only way here where we find that. So what governance has been proposed? What is it we're trying to create? As we said, this is a processing construction. It is a type of governance that is based on the concept of the management of shared resources, which is the river and all the ecosystems around it. It is based in cooperation, dialogue, and consensus between the parties. It is pluralistic. I mean, it has to be integrated by all the different stakeholders, and it has to be decentralized also. It has to have an ecosystem approach that integrates everything that has to do with taking care of the river, of the soil, of the biological diversity, but with men, with human being part of the system, men and their livelihoods being part of it, and of the decisions that are made. So it has to have a prospective approach that it anticipates the future and the problems that may come, and it has to be proactive too. That actions have to be taken with real participation. With real participation from whom? From, well, the governments, obviously, who are the decision makers, the local decision makers, the local government is very important. The national, the subnationals and the nationals too. Also that we get the participation of the entrepreneurs. And when we talk about the entrepreneurs here, we're not talking about mega projects. We are thinking here about the, family entrepreneurs, family enterprises, people that are trying to survive or make a living based on ecotourism, nature, and users like fishermen also, and the local community, of course. the community through the civil society. It is important to highlight here that the NGOs, local NGOs, are very important also because of the same thing that the local governments, because they know about the problems and about the situations. Also, you see in the organizations around the basin that there is a great importance of observers, and it's something that has come from a long time. The importance that Gisela was also mentioning that is essential, which is to have the participation of the academia. We need research in order to be able to do the management we want, and in order to be able to do the land organization, organize the activities and the different means. It's important to see what are the focal points for the conservation. So it's a lot of things that we need. We need the investigation. We need to see what the reality is, what the action has to be taken. So in a given moment, we're going to have to do some task forces of experts for specific topics that would support the governance of this committee. So I said that I wanted to talk about the civil society and a little bit what the civil society contributes in this governance or what it can contribute. First of all, the knowledge of the environmental problems that more than anybody else, they know it because they're part of the community. They also have some interest focused on the topic. In this case, they're talking about conservation, ecotourism, that different from us, from what we live in the management committee of Rincon de Frontier. The authorities have to dilute their attention into many different topics sometimes that are of their competence. It is not just the environment, but the organized civil society can focus on some of the topics, like in this case, the preservation of nature. The continuity through time, we have seen in these 17 years that lots of municipal and department governments have changed, municipal governments. However, we remain firm, we're on the same line, and also the majority of the people in one or another way, although there is some personal turnover, many people also remain. And we're also talking about some of the border spaces, and we have a freedom of movement that sometimes the formal authorities don't have it. Daniel, 4 minutes. Okay, I'm gonna hurry up. And well, also the independence from the political movement and the agenda of international affairs. So sometimes, like in the government, this is happening at the level of Mercosur. We can remain kind of apart from this, and we can keep on working. Governance for what? Okay, we need the governments to be able to plan, to manage, and protect the shared resources. Good part of what I was saying, we have to ensure the equitable and sustainable use. These are two very important points to get the support, social, political, and financial support, as well as the sustainability to be able to have an accountability, because transparency is very important. At the local level, we have to do this in order to do the management and everything. We have to consolidate Campo General Avalos and also develop some research efforts in other countries for what we were commenting, to be able to plan, to be able to move forward towards the plan of the management of the corridor and the joint territorial management to harmonize efficient regulations, especially, and coordinate the joint control of threats, illegal fishing and illegal hunting. So this about research is very important, and I repeat that again. We are trying that when there's people coming to an area, that they can also go through the areas of the neighboring countries. And every time that a group of researchers have come, they've left us with a good set of experiences about our area. So in tourism, what's there to do? We have to develop and make a hierarchy of the upper tourism of nature, train human resources in this trinational area to promote jointly the trinational biological corridor, to implement the trinational circuits like water tourism, ecotourism, to facilitate the mobility and exchange of visitors. This here is an example of the trinational training that was held in 2010, where we had the participation of Brazilians, Uruguayans, the Argentinians, because of the boat issue. They couldn't participate because there was no boat service on the week that we had the course. Some water rights, bird watching, which is very important in the area, the guided visits, and well, regional integration. We have to support the initiatives, not just the environmental initiatives, but also those that want to recover the memory and the identity of the area, strengthen the exchange activities in the broad sense, facilitate the circulation of neighbors in the three cities, and cooperate from the local perspective to solve issues at the higher level. So this Brasilera Island is over here, and this is uh, something that has created some differences between Brazil and Uruguay. What is proposed from the civil society and with the local governments is that instead of having this being a contested limit, it has to be a place of encounter, a shared center for interpretation in the heart of the corridor, so that we can have the three flags over there. So this is a proposal from the local level, and we think that this could be a solution because we cannot understand that this is a place of conflict, an island that is not inhabited, and the best purpose that it could have is to be the place for environmental preservation. So we're close to the end and some of the progresses. Well, the last couple of months, this is a picture from a Brazilian paper. There's been an unanimous declaration by the executives, by the mayor of Barra, the one from Bejunion and the one from Montecaseros. They support this proposal of the transborder movement. The confirmation of a group of representatives from the civil society and the local governments. The entrepreneurs are also joining from small tourist enterprises. Also, the declaration of interest from different organizations and different areas of integration. And with regards to land organization, we have been able that the international bridge that is projected between Uruguay and Argentina should also be in an area of lower environmental impact. So we are attentive for this navigability or project in the Uruguay River can also be uh, decided on. This is done with the Ministry of Land Organization, trying to use the alternatives with the lower environmental impact. The challenges to formalize governance, which so far is a construct that is taking place in practice, being able to have a greater engagement of the regional and national governments, capacity, technical capacity building in all local stakeholders in alliance with the universities and other research institutes, agree on an action plan, get the resources for the plan of action, and having an awareness campaign. So just to close, beyond the triple border, we want to escalate this experience and create a network of natural areas over the Uruguay River. There are some areas like Cajari, the binational corridor of Maya and the Kauai Islands, the province park of Mocona, and the biosphere reserve of Javoti. These are some of the areas as we have realized in a meeting that was held not long ago because of an environmental forum that there is a lot of small municipal reserves that can join this network. So we're integrating this network of parks in Latin America. So maybe in the future we can bring or join that big park network. And well, what we're thinking also is making this big corridor of biodiversity in the Uruguay River. That's a faraway dream, but it's possible. And well, our friends from Argentina have taught us a phrase in Guarani. It says "Ñande, ñandere tabe," which is something like "Together we are more," and it's like, yeah, we can do more together. So that's a little bit of the idea. So thank you very much for the time. Thank you very much, Daniel. Thank you very much. I really love the closing with this phrase, and the Cave, which is in symphony with what Gisela was saying when she was closing the presentation. Thank you again for the time. Thank you for being open to be with us, for adjusting the presentation to what we asked you with the technical information. And all speakers have made that extra effort. So thank you very much. And I just want to make a brief comment that when you were saying that about comparing the sizes of the reserves that Andrew was presenting at the beginning and the experience in Colombia, I mean, Uruguay is a small country. And the challenge also, we wanted to bring this case, especially because we have this involvement of the civil society. It is an organization that has pushed this from a municipality at a small scale, but they have been able to be the engine for this process, and it's becoming very important. It's been excellent to be able to promote and activate this with this good governance approach. So part of what we are working on in this course and in the cycle of the webinars is how the different stakeholders are key for good governance, and how sometimes the processes are driven by the government institutions, sometimes civil society organizations or the academia. But anyway, these efforts from the different places really transform the territory and generate the effective management of the conservation of biodiversity, and hopefully also the equitable distribution of benefits too, because that's important. Thank you very much for our three speakers. Now,
And now we will go back to Stanley for the time remaining for him to be the moderator for the Q&A session. We have some questions that we have been taken from the chat. And Stanley wanted to make some comments in order to integrate these three presentations. Yes, thank you, Christina. I would like to remind the students and all participants in general that you can ask your questions on the chat. And I would like to ask the speakers a last short intervention to reflect upon what we're seeing here and what this webinar is about, which is related to a modern vision of the management of protected areas, which is also a part of different proposals or mechanisms or international agreements that today we call them the third generation protected areas, which have been integrated to the landscape. And this is something that we looked at in the first and second generation protected areas as well. And we are taking these from a governance by jurisdiction to a governance by agreements, in which we have our own mandates, in which we have our own boundaries, because we would like to be a part of this dynamic in which we can work on the territory with different jurisdictions and different stakeholders and different powers. And this is forcing us to act differently. Someone said when we mentioned this, how can we work out of the protected areas if I have no jurisdiction over there? And that is what we need to change in a way of thinking, because we need to propose this governance not based on the power granted by the legislation, but we need to be convinced of sharing these interests and objectives and other elements in order to come to agreements. And in that sense, I would like to ask the speakers in only 3 minutes, in order to be more dynamic and advanced, I would like to have a concrete answer, which are the 3 punctual aspects. First, please think about someone who said in the chat that in Venezuela, with these presentations, they wanted to start working on this topic, and maybe you have motivated people to want to act on this. I'm on a protected area, and I have the boundaries, and now I would like to be a part of this dynamic that you are mentioning, like tree borders and working on land management as well. So first, quickly, which are the conditions that will be enable us to go out and work on the outside? Well, how can I create the conditions, the enabling conditions, 2 or 3 enabling conditions that you can signal during the first minute? On the second minute, I would like for you to tell me, when I go and work with multiple interests and multiple stakeholders and jurisdictions and sectors, what mechanisms and what recommendations at the technical level, or what good practices would you recommend, one or two good practices in order to be able to work with multiple stakeholders on the territory? Good practices or some sort of mechanisms that you can advise on how to deal with this. And also, these processes are for the long run. We can start and stop along the way, because we are going to generate a wave that is going to make us start again. So how can we support these long-term processes? Where can you get the resources? And processes like the Trifinio have been there operating for many years. So what can you say? How can we start? Just think about recommendation for a person that is just beginning with this process. You have 3 minutes. Gisela? First, for the first topic, the context that you're in, which is that's first, and the context is going to be territorial, and then you need to strengthen the capacities and take a look at the conflicts that you have, because you need to work with others, and that's for the first point. For the second topic, yes, go ahead. For the second topic, when we talk about multiple stakeholders, you need to analyze your attitude. If you want to start fighting, you are already losing. And second, instead of complaining, you need to contribute. And third, put yourself in someone else's shoes. Let's imagine that you are a member of the academia or the major or member of the civil society, but you need to invite researchers to put themselves in others' positions. And for the last point that you mentioned, there you need to be persistent. And there is something that I have seen, which is the mystic of the people that work, for example, in national park, people that have been working there for 30 years and are not tired, people from the civil society that has not is getting tired, and you'll find people like you crazy, isolated when it comes to governance or academia, and then those are the crazy people that no one pays attention to. You need to pay attention to that person, because that's going to be your partner, the person that you're going to work with. And no one asked how much money did we have to do this. Well, we used just a cooperation, and it's not the flag of cooperation, but it's others flags, and how can we together can work on the territory as a whole. Giselle, 30 seconds. How can we deal with the changes, political rotation, and personal turnover for those processes to sustain them through time? Well, that is a wonderful question, because change is permanent. So every time there's a change, you need to start again, to go back to the beginning, and there's nothing else you can do. But to the extent that you strengthen the capacities, no matter where this person is going to, that person is going to help wherever, regardless of where they are. So we need to be resilient. Thank you. Gisela, thank you for being accurate on your answers. You're an expert on this topic. Angel? A pleasure to see you. Well, I would like to congratulate you and Gisela and Daniel for your presentations, because these three questions that you made are very interesting, and I think that they are the basis for the development of the territory and the conditions in order to be able to work, or these enabling conditions to work on the outside. I think that will depend first on the legal procedures in your country allowing for this, because we have some legal limitations that we must define first. And second, we need to have common interest in order to leave a territory and expand. For example, moving from a protected area where we have a managing committee and go into a territory of a biosphere reserve that it's 2, 3, or 4 protected areas. We need to define the common interest, which is something that we have been working on in Honduras. And second, if you have multiple stakeholders, what mechanisms and good practices can I recommend? Well, this is related to number one. If we all have common agreements, Then we'll find an integrating element. For example, in the case of water, how can we integrate ourselves around water in order to make decisions, and how can we strengthen stakeholders in that framework? Because so far I have not seen a human being or living being that can live without water, so it's easy to connect. And what are the processes for the long term? I think that it's important here to define them from all the way from the beginning. I learned Daniel, he is trying to define this, and it's quite clear that we need to study territory and where we need to go, which is the purpose, and clearly define the agreements all the way from the beginning. And I think that's key. And we also must define regulations with common agreements where we can all agree and not approve things just because we have the authority to do so, but we have to have unanimous approval with everyone's participation. And in here, there's something important, which is that we all know, but we have our knowledge, but we can all learn as well. And Angela, in relation to dealing with changes and a continuous turnover. Would you like to add something to what Gisela mentioned? And I think that in Latin America, it's quite interesting. And I like the fact that I also participate in political environment and I can advise congressmen and mayors. And when we sit and talk with people that are running for president. So what's important is not to lose sight of the objectives of the population, because population is not going to change. They are going to vote and elect, but it's also important to plan. And this is something that we're doing. We are planning ahead, because planning should not end with the government administration. We need to go beyond that. After that transition period, and as Gisela said, every 4 years, we need to go back and start training all the people that will be hired by municipalities or the different communities. Thank you, Angel. Great contribution. And now, Daniel, I think that you're quite new, as I understood, in these processes, but in spite of that, you must have field experiences. So your answers? Well, it's hard to summarize in only 3 minutes, such a short time. But I think that the main or key element is patience, because with all these processes, mainly when you start from you're starting to reach the top, so you need to go before that to go through frustration periods where nothing seems to fit or adapt to our objectives. But there comes a time when all the stars are aligned, and then you start advancing. So we need to be patient, and of course we need to start creating alliances in each country, and alliances between the countries, because it's important. Because we were recently talking about civil society, but there's nothing we can do only as civil society, because we need the skills of the governments at all levels, and of course the contribution of the people that live on the particular territories. I mean, all inhabitants. And in relation to conflicts, some areas have much more conflict, and some conflicts are bigger or not. But it's always necessary to be able to negotiate. Some things are non-negotiable, of course, but to the extent possible, we need to try and negotiate. And gradually, when we start created protected areas, we had some neighbors that had problems. And I think that the road was not to exclude all livestock, but we needed to come to an agreement in order to start decreasing so as I said, we must always try gradually to negotiate and try to be flexible, because sometimes an excellent solution is going to be enemy from that is good. So also we need to scale our proposals, and I think it's quite important that we need to start locally, and then we must coordinate. As Stanley mentioned, we have people that are motivated by our experiences, so we need to try and scale, maybe start locally, or I don't know, then move cross border, and then keep on scaling our experiences. And we also need to scale our support. So Something else that was said is that, and I think it's also key, because we are going to definitely need the academia, we are going to need research and scientific contribution, and maybe not exactly basic scientific contribution, but that contribution that can be taken to reality. And as Gisela said, research and action. And to in order to be able to manage these natural protected areas near the border, we also need our knowledge. I'm going to take a look at the focal points when it comes to conservation, and we need to analyze connectivity and the different activities that might be appropriate and those that are not, which must be excluded little by little. So I think that we cannot keep on going without this knowledge. So thank you, Daniel. And we have one last question. We only have 5 minutes before we close, and we have a question from Claudia Nunez, the coordinator of a group for the Amazonia Vision. So, Claudia, we're going to give 1 minute to each speaker to answer the question, and then 1 minute to give us some closing remarks, and then we'll close. Cristina, the question is, Claudia Nunez says, who is going to make real decisions as part of the governance mechanisms that you spoke about? Shall we have multiple stakeholders? And how can we balance the final recommendations based on your experience? What would be your recommendations about all of these topics? Who's going to make real decisions as part of these mechanisms? If we have multiple stakeholders, how can we balance the dominating power? And which are the recommendations? 1 minute each. Gisela? Well, basically, everyone makes decisions about the territory, but everyone does that in a disarticulated manner, and that's where we end up in conflict between the authorities, the academia, the productive sectors, and so on. That's one of the topics, but we also must mention that if we are working on as an environmentalist on protected areas or biosphere reserves, well, then the productive sectors will transform these territories, and they are leading. So how can we balance that? By strengthening the skills of all of us, so that we can have this territory that we must all strengthen. And we need to know that we are working on land management, and the communities, and excuse me for taking their time, but communities are going to demonstrate how strong they are. For example, park rangers, some of them have been murdered, they have disappeared. So when it comes to environmental defenders, I think that this is serious, something that we must take into consideration. The extractivism is telling us that the defenders of the environment, it's not just us. We must be everyone, and we need to come with ways to reconcile. So this pandemic has told us, or it taught us, that we need to work together. Thank you. Angel, 1 minute. Thank you, Stanley. When it comes to decision making, I think that this is a two-way. When it comes to governance, the government makes decisions based on the legal procedures, and if we are dealing with governance, then it's a common agreement in the case of Honduras when it comes to protected areas. And now we are working on biosphere reserves, and we have another institution where we integrate all stakeholders in the territory, those that can have local direct influence or those that can have an indirect influence on the territory, and decisions are made within the framework of the points that have been previously defined, or what we call a regulation, through which we can define how we can have a meeting, a consultation, a problem, a field inspection, who will make decisions when it comes to governance, and also when can we scale this to an organism to make legal decisions. So it's important to keep our legal framework. And I would like to tell Daniel that when we started with the trigenio, one of our limitations was the legal aspect, because we have 3 different legal frameworks on 3 nations when it comes to organizations, natural resources, and participation, and army, and many other things. So this is an important point, which is to come to an agreement regarding our legal coincidence in order to make decisions. Otherwise, it's going to be impossible to act and make decisions between the 3 countries. Thank you, Angel. And Aiden, you have 1 minute only. Yes, I would like to appreciate your comment, Angel. And in this particular case, I think that the civil society is taking the initiative, but decisions are made by the competent institutions. And when it comes to protected areas, is the National System of Protected Areas, and also a co-management committee. But when we have other types of decisions that are more related to other areas, we have our local governments. And when the decisions are transnational, then it gets more complicated. A lot of complications emerge. And as Angel was saying, in the case of illegal fishing or abusive fishing, the organisms pertain to different levels of competencies. So it is very difficult to analyze the regulations. And as you saw in one of our slides, the harmony, for example, when it comes to fishing, well, I would say that it is an old flag that we have with the cross-border movements, because we have binational organisms that became administrators with competency of the Uruguay River. And at the same time, in Corrientes, we have also the Flora and Fauna Department with competency. And in Brazil, we have IBAMA, and also have SEMA, the Environmental Secretariat of Rio Grande do Sul. So I would say it's quite complicated. And the idea would be to be able, with all these work groups, in order to define a specific topic, and then we must try and reach an agreement that would be beneficial for all the parties and come to our objective. But it's not easy. Yeah, it's like having a puzzle and then put it back together when it comes to geographical and political management in our countries. It's quite a challenge. Yes, and if you allow me, something important as well, Stanley, is that in general, these cross-border, faraway areas are far from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and from regional governments, and of course from the national governments, because in here, Uruguay is a small country, and we have 140 kilometers away from the department capital. And from Montevideo, it might not seem that much, but Barra de Paradijes is one of the smallest municipalities, and it's 700 kilometers from Porto Alegre. And then I lost the count, but it's like 2,000 kilometers away from Brazil, and something similar happens with Argentina. So I think it's not easy to harmonize all of this. Thank you. Well, you have the challenges. We need to keep on working little by little. And we must be patient, we must be united, we must work on our agreements, because many of the things have been discussed today. And now our 3 speakers are going to have 1 minute with a final remark with the main idea that you would like to reinforce, or something that you would like to add that you might consider important to give as a final remark of this webinar. Well, I'll tell the order, and then we will start with Angel. Thank you. So now we're in alphabetical order. Okay, fine. Okay, for me, I would like to say that it's been an honor to be able to share with all of you this morning. And in our case, I represent a government institution which is part of the Council of Ministers. But when we are out there on the territory, it's important not to make unilateral decisions, because as the conservation area we have spaces for protected areas for the co-management committee so that we can have representatives from the municipalities and also from NGOs or a group of municipalities with a coordinator, for example, Comanejo, which will empower them as the civil society and will also give us a chance to make decisions at this level so that everyone will acquire much more capacity and experience. But of course, we need to get the trust when it comes to the common handling of this goal that we must define. And I think that this is key. We must not underestimate anyone because it's important because we all can keep on learning. So congratulations again, because I think that these type of webinars are really important. I have learned a lot from you this morning. And mainly at this level on how the university is handling things in an orderly manner. We are practical, we are field people, but we try to work with structures. And to close, I would like to say that statistics are really important. It's important to have a review of everything so that in the end, when we must make a decision, we have an important basis. And something that we did not mention is that in the face of climate change, we must make decisions that are in conflict when it comes to climate change. So we must go over this in order to prevent these types of conflicts. So for example, in Honduras, we are vulnerable. We had 2 hurricanes that left us destroyed and that changed many of the plans that we had. And now we are trying to rebuild and are still learning. So thank you. Thank you, Angel. You have a question on the chat, so maybe you can start answering. Daniel, you have 1 minute only. Well, I think that the challenge is important, but it's worth to fight for these border protected areas, and we need to improve conservation because we're talking about bigger areas, and we must protect the species. And I think that it is also important for conservation purposes, and it's also important to have the ecotourisms that can be generated in order to have more income for local communities. And I think that it's important for local communities, and it's also important to integrate the countries. And this is the reason why we were saying that they are the parks of peace, and these are the 3 goals that are worth the challenge. And we need to start working from the puzzle, from the top down or down to the top. Thank you. Thank you. Gisela? Well, I would like to say that life is worth it. And I think that we are working for the life of the species, the planet, the communities, our lives as managers and members of the academia. And I think that here the biggest challenge for life in this planet is that we must remember that we are coming from a process. And if this hadn't been the case, we wouldn't be here today, and we are part of this process. And we must also need to reconcile with each other and with everyone else, because we need to talk to the people that we are not talking to. And I think that this is my recommendation. And we require environmental peace. We need to reconcile. And you saw a video of the voices of the park rangers, voices of war. And I do not want to have to go back to these topics, not for any of us, because I am hurting for the Black communities, for the communities of peasants, for the indigenous communities, my colleagues, my park rangers and researchers, those who have passed away, who have died. So I think that protecting the lives should not cost us our lives. So I apologize, but this is a call to everyone to take care of and to help people understand that we are the defenders of the environment, but not only the environmentalists, but everyone that is an inhabitant of this planet. So thank you, Gisela, and hopefully someday the whole country will become a protected area and all inhabitants will become park rangers. In general terms, protected areas for 3rd generation integrated to the landscape. That's the challenge that we are going to propose for this webinar, and the mechanisms of how we can attain this reintegration to the landscape and leaving the jurisdiction area and moving into the area of common agreements, area of dialogue, and as Angel said, looking for a common vision for the whole territory and to reconcile with everyone, as Gisela said. So this is the end of our webinar, and I would like to invite you. In a week from now, we're going to have other presentations with a different focus. We will also be talking about the landscape, but talking about international organisms and agreements. So hopefully we'll have the participation of the Commission of the Environment in Central America and other organizations to discuss all of this between the framework of international organisms for bilateral agreements and multilateral as well between the countries. So how can we develop governance and protected areas? And that is our next webinar. You are cordially invited. You must register again for the next webinar, but hopefully we'll have your participation. You'll receive a copy or a link to today's webinar. We'll send you all the link as well of last week's webinar. One in Spanish, one in English, and another one translated to Portuguese. So see you in a week from now. Maybe if possible, maybe you can turn on your camera so that we can take a picture. We are united even though we're far away, geographically speaking. We are united in our diversity. We'll work together for our lives. Please smile because we have to take at least a couple of pictures. So keep on smiling, please. We have frozen smiles already, but it's okay. Well, let's wear a smile for a while. Well, we're now making jokes, okay? But it's okay. Okay, we're ready. Thank you.